I'm Iris, 32, and for most of my life, I was the family disappointment living in the shadow of my perfect younger sister, Eleanor. Growing up in Seattle with parents who compared us constantly left deep emotional scars. 5 years ago, I finally walked away from their toxic behavior, building a life on my own terms. Now they're suddenly desperate to reconnect, begging me to return to the family that once discarded me. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to create boundaries with toxic family members. The house I grew up in was a beautiful craftsman in one of Seattle's nicest neighborhoods. With its manicured lawn and perfect interior straight out of a design magazine, it looked like the ideal family home. My father, Thomas, was a successful corporate attorney at one of the city's prestigious law firms, and my mother, Victoria, ran her own interior design business catering to wealthy clients. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. Inside those walls, however, was a completely different reality. My earliest memories are actually quite happy. For the first 5 years of my life, I was an only child who received my parents' undivided attention. I remember my father teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway, my mother reading bedtime stories and taking me to the children's museum. I was their little princess. At least until my sister Eleanor was born when I was 5 years old. The shift wasn't immediate, but it was unmistakable. Eleanor was a beautiful baby with golden curls and big blue eyes, whereas I had always been plain with my straight brown hair and average features. As a 5-year-old, I didn't understand why Mommy was too tired to read me stories anymore, or why Daddy stopped taking me to the park on weekends. I just knew that something had changed. By the time Eleanor was 3 and I was 8, the favoritism had become glaringly obvious. Eleanor showed an early aptitude for art, creating colorful drawings that my parents would proudly display on the refrigerator and show to every visitor. My own achievements, straight A's in school, winning the spelling bee, being selected for the gifted program, were acknowledged with distracted nods and quick, "That's nice, sweetie" responses, before attention returned to Eleanor. I still vividly remember my 4th-grade science fair. I had worked for weeks on my project about plant growth under different light conditions, staying up late to record data and create my display board. The science fair fell on the same evening as Eleanor's first dance recital. There was never any question about which event my parents would attend. "Mrs. Jensen will take you to the science fair," my mother informed me that morning as she carefully arranged Eleanor's hair into a perfect bun. "We'll be at the recital, but I'm sure your project will do fine." My project didn't just do fine, it won first place. Mrs. Jensen, our neighbor, took photos of me receiving my blue ribbon and drove me home afterward. When I excitedly showed the ribbon to my parents, they were busy watching the video recording of Eleanor's recital for the 3rd time. "That's great, Iris," my father said without looking away from the screen. "Put it on your desk." Eleanor's dance costume had cost nearly $300 for that one recital. My science fair supplies came from my own allowance money. This pattern continued throughout my childhood. When I was 12, I discovered that my parents had been putting money into a college fund for me since I was born, a fact I learned only because they decided to use a significant portion of it to pay for Eleanor's private art lessons with a renowned local artist. "Eleanor has a special gift," my mother explained when I questioned this decision. "These are formative years for her talent. You're smart enough to get scholarships when the time comes." Family photos told the same story. In our living room, there were at least a dozen framed photos of Eleanor. Eleanor at her dance recitals, Eleanor with her art projects, Eleanor at summer camp. There were only 2 photos that included me, our formal family portrait updated every 3 years, and one school photo tucked away on a side table. I adapted by becoming fiercely self-sufficient. I learned that the only validation I could count on came from my own achievements, not from my parents' approval. I threw myself into academics, finding a sense of control in earning perfect grades. My teachers became my cheerleaders, providing the encouragement and recognition my parents withheld. By my teenage years, I had developed severe anxiety and persistent self-doubt. My mother's critical comments about my appearance were particularly damaging. I was naturally athletic with a strong build, while Eleanor was petite and delicate. "You should really watch what you eat, Iris," my mother would say at dinner, eyeing my plate. Those jeans are getting awfully tight." Meanwhile, Eleanor would be encouraged to take seconds because she needed to keep her strength up for her art. My father's emotional distance was equally painful. As an attorney, he had always hoped I would follow in his footsteps. When I expressed interest in business and finance instead of law during my junior year of high school, his disappointment was palpable. "Business is for people who aren't clever enough for law or medicine," he said dismissively, "but I suppose it suits your practical nature." By contrast, when Eleanor announced she wanted to pursue art school, my parents were ecstatic, immediately researching the best programs and arranging for portfolio preparation classes. My high school graduation exemplified the disparity in how we were treated. Despite graduating as valedictorian with a full scholarship to the University of Washington, my celebration consisted of a quiet dinner at a local restaurant with just our immediate family. No party, no special gifts. "We're saving for Eleanor's graduation," my mother explained when I asked if I could invite a few friends over to celebrate. "You understand, don't you? Art school is expensive and we want to give her a proper send-off when the time comes." I did understand all too well. I understood that no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough to compete with Eleanor's natural place in the spotlight of our parents' affection. 3 years later, when Eleanor graduated from high school with average grades but an impressive art portfolio, my parents threw an extravagant garden party with over 50 guests, catered food, and a professional photographer. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Eleanor was the child they were proud of, the one worth celebrating. I was the afterthought, the reliable one who didn't need the fuss because I would be fine on my own. And in many ways, they were right. I had learned to be fine on my own because I'd never been given any other choice. Leaving for college was like taking my first real breath after years of living underwater. The University of Washington campus became my sanctuary, a place where no one knew me as Eleanor's less interesting sister or measured my worth against someone else's talents. I was simply Iris, student friend individual. I had chosen to live in the dorms despite the university being in Seattle, just 30 minutes from my parents' house. The scholarship covered housing, and I craved the independence. My roommate Zoe was from Portland, friendly, straightforward, and refreshingly drama-free. Within our first week together, we had bonded over shared classes and late-night study sessions. "You're so organized," Zoe commented one evening as I color-coded my semester schedule. "I bet your parents are super proud to have such a responsible daughter." I remember the strange feeling her words created, a mixture of pride and emptiness. "They're more focused on my sister," I replied awkwardly. "She's the artistic one." Zoe's confused expression stayed with me. "But you're like scary smart," she said. "That's something to be proud of too." Such a simple observation, yet it highlighted the absurdity of my family's dynamics. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued the qualities I possessed, rather than lamenting the ones I lacked. My freshman year brought a freedom I had never experienced. I joined the finance club and the Women in Business Association, finding community among ambitious peers. My academic success continued, earning me recognition from professors who took genuine interest in my development. Professor Michaels, my economics advisor, became a particular mentor, encouraging me to pursue opportunities I might have otherwise overlooked. "Iris, you have a natural aptitude for financial analysis," he told me after I aced his notoriously difficult midterm. "You should consider applying for the summer internship at Seattle Financial Group." This validation from respected adults was intoxicating. While my parents had always treated my academic achievements as expected rather than exceptional, my professors saw something special in me. I secured that internship and excelled, setting the foundation for my future career. Meanwhile, my visits home became increasingly strained. During my first Thanksgiving break, I arrived with news of my 4.0 GPA and the prestigious internship I'd secured for the following summer. My announcement was met with polite nods before the conversation quickly turned to Eleanor's acceptance into the Rhode Island School of Design, one of the top art schools in the country. "We're so proud," my mother gushed, serving Eleanor an extra helping of mashed potatoes. The admissions officer said her portfolio was one of the most impressive they'd seen from a freshman applicant. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate, feeling invisible in my own family. That Christmas brought another painful reminder of where I stood in the family hierarchy. After dinner, we gathered in the living room to exchange gifts. Eleanor received an expensive professional camera to document your artistic journey, my father explained proudly. I received a generic sweater in a color I never wore with the gift receipt still tucked in the box. We weren't sure what you needed for school, my mother said with a shrug when she saw my expression. You can exchange it if you want. The spring break of my sophomore year delivered another blow. I had declined several invitations from friends to join their vacation plans, assuming I would spend the week with my family. 2 days before break began, I called home to confirm my arrival time. Oh, my mother said, sounding flustered. We'll actually be in New York that week. Eleanor has interviews with some galleries interested in her work, so we thought we'd make a family trip of it. Family trip? I repeated. Were you planning to tell me? Well, we knew you'd be busy with your studies, she replied smoothly. You're always so responsible. Eleanor needs our support right now with these important connections. I spent that spring break alone in my dorm room, one of the few students who hadn't gone home or on vacation. The silence of the empty building matched the hollow feeling in my chest. Junior year brought an unexpected bright spot into my life, Marcus. We met in a business ethics seminar where his thoughtful comments and quick wit caught my attention. Tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile, he was studying pre-law but had a minor in business administration. Our first date was coffee that turned into dinner, that turned into a 4-hour conversation about everything from economic theory to our favorite childhood books. For weeks, I hesitated to introduce Marcus to my family, afraid of how they might treat him or what he might think of our dynamic. When Thanksgiving approached, however, I finally worked up the courage to invite him to join us. The dinner was a revelation, not because my family behaved differently, but because seeing their behavior through Marcus's eyes made me realize how abnormal it truly was. My mother's backhanded compliments, my father's dismissive tone, and Eleanor's entitled attitude stood out in sharp relief against Marcus's obvious discomfort. When my mother commented on my weight, Iris has always struggled with those last 15 pounds, unlike Eleanor, who can eat anything. I saw Marcus's jaw tighten. When my father interrogated him about his law school plans, but showed zero interest in my recent academic award, Marcus shot me a questioning glance. Later that night, as we drove back to campus, Marcus finally spoke. Is it always like that? Like what? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. The way they treat you compared to your sister. It's like you're invisible to them unless they're criticizing you. His observation spoken so plainly broke something open inside me. It's been that way since Eleanor was born, I admitted. I'm used to it. Marcus reached for my hand. You shouldn't have to be used to that, Iris. That's not normal or okay. His validation of what I had felt for years but never fully acknowledged was the first step in a long journey toward recognizing the toxicity of my family dynamics. Senior year brought more milestones and more disappointments. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in finance and business analytics. My parents attended the ceremony, but left immediately after the main commencement, missing the business school honors ceremony, where I received special recognition. Eleanor's year-end art show was that evening, and they couldn't be late. I accepted a position with a prestigious financial firm in Seattle, beginning my career with both excitement and trepidation about remaining so close to my family. The distance I had maintained during college had been healing, and I wasn't sure I could preserve my mental health while living in the same city as my parents. For the first year, I tried to balance limited family contact with building my professional reputation. Sunday dinners once a month and occasional family events seemed manageable, but each interaction left me emotionally drained. Eleanor, now in her 3rd year at RISD, would call home constantly with demands for additional financial support or parental intervention with professors who didn't understand her vision. Meanwhile, Marcus and I had continued dating, our relationship deepening despite the geographical challenge of his attending law school in Chicago. During one of our video calls, after I'd spent 20 minutes recounting my mother's latest cutting remarks at a family dinner, Marcus made a suggestion that would change the course of my life. "You know my firm has offices in Chicago," he said carefully. "And there are plenty of financial firms here that would be lucky to have someone with your skills. Have you ever thought about making a change?" I had thought about it, constantly in fact. The idea of putting physical distance between myself and my family's toxic influence was increasingly appealing. When an opportunity arose 6 months later for a transfer to the Chicago office of a major financial consulting firm, I seized it without hesitation. My parents' reaction to my announcement was predictably self-centered. Chicago. "But what about Sunday dinners?" my mother asked, as if my career advancement was an inconvenience to her schedule. "This seems impulsive," my father added. "Running away from home at your age?" Eleanor, home for the summer, rolled her eyes. "It's not like you contribute much to family gatherings anyway. You're always so quiet." I was 23 years old with a promising career and a chance at happiness. For the first time, I chose myself over their expectations and opinions. 2 weeks later, I packed my belongings into my car and drove east toward a new beginning, leaving behind the shadow I had lived in for so long. Chicago greeted me with its towering skyline and bustling energy, a city where nobody knew me as the lesser daughter, where I could define myself on my own terms. My new apartment was a small one-bedroom in Wicker Park, nothing fancy, but entirely mine. I spent that first weekend arranging my few belongings, hanging art I had chosen myself, and feeling a sense of ownership over my space that I had never experienced before. My position at Hamilton Financial Consulting challenged me in all the right ways. As a junior financial analyst, I worked long hours analyzing market trends and creating investment strategies for corporate clients. My Seattle experience had prepared me well, and I quickly earned the respect of my colleagues through diligent work and innovative approaches to complex problems. The coincidence of Marcus working in Chicago had been a factor in my decision to relocate, but I hadn't expected our paths to cross so directly. 3 weeks after my move, I was grabbing coffee at a shop near my office when I heard a familiar voice. "Iris, is that you?" Turning around, I found myself face to face with Marcus, dressed in a sharp suit and looking as surprised as I felt. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" I asked, unable to keep the smile from spreading across my face. "My firm's office is in the building across the street," he explained. "I come here every morning. What about you?" "I work at Hamilton Financial just down the block," I replied, gesturing vaguely in the direction of my office tower. The chance encounter quickly evolved into daily coffee meetings, then dinner dates, then weekends spent exploring our new city together. Without the shadow of my family dynamics hovering over us, our relationship flourished. Marcus was everything my family was not: supportive, attentive, genuinely interested in my thoughts and accomplishments. His own family, whom I met after we had been dating in Chicago for 3 months, were equally refreshing. The Becketts were warm and welcoming, immediately treating me as if I were already part of their family. His mother, Carol, asked thoughtful questions about my career and actually listened to the answers. His father, David, engaged me in discussions about financial markets without a hint of condescension. His sister, Jamie, teased Marcus, but included me in their inside jokes, making me feel like I belonged. "Your family is amazing," I told Marcus as we drove back from our first weekend visit to their suburban home. "They're so normal." Marcus laughed, but then grew serious. "That's how families are supposed to be, Iris. What you grew up with, that's what's not normal." His words resonated deeply. Through my relationship with Marcus and exposure to his healthy family dynamic, I began to recognize just how dysfunctional my own upbringing had been. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Levine, who specialized in adult children of emotionally abusive parents. Those weekly sessions became crucial to my healing process, helping me identify patterns and begin to break them. After 18 months of dating in Chicago, Marcus proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. We decided on a small wedding planned for the following spring. When I called my parents to share the news, their response was predictably underwhelming. "Engaged? Well, that's nice," my mother said distractedly. "Have you set a date? You should consult with us before finalizing anything. Eleanor has several important showcases coming up, and we wouldn't want any scheduling conflicts." The wedding planning process became a battleground. Despite contributing only a minimal amount financially, my parents had strong opinions about everything from the venue to the guest list. "The lakeside venue is too modern," my mother complained during one of her visits to Chicago, ostensibly to help with wedding plans. "The Westbrook Hotel would be much more appropriate. That's where the Andersons had their daughter's wedding last year." "We prefer lakeside," I explained patiently. "It's within our budget and has the view of the water that we want." "Well, if you had let us contribute more, budget wouldn't be an issue." She sniffed, though their contribution had been a token amount that covered barely 10% of the costs. Marcus and I were paying for most of the wedding ourselves with some generous help from his parents. Then came the dress shopping experience I had dreaded. My mother and Eleanor flew in for a weekend supposedly to help me find my wedding gown. What should have been a special mother-daughter bonding experience quickly devolved into criticism. "That silhouette does nothing for your figure," my mother commented as I tried on a dress I loved. "You need something more slimming." "Maybe something with sleeves," Eleanor suggested, eyeing my arms critically. "And not so much detail on the bodice. It's a bit much for you." I ended up purchasing a dress the following weekend with Marcus's mother and sister instead, who were enthusiastic and supportive, making me feel beautiful rather than flawed. The guest list became another point of contention. My parents submitted a list of 40 of their friends and business associates, people I barely knew, while questioning my desire to invite close colleagues and friends from Chicago. "Who is this Sarah person?" "And Alex. We've never heard you mention them," my father said dismissively during a phone call about invitations. "They're my friends here in Chicago," I explained. "Sarah and I work together, and Alex and his wife have been incredibly welcoming to both Marcus and me." "Well, we need room for the Hendersons and the Palmers," my mother interjected. "They're very important connections for your father." The final straw came when Eleanor demanded to be my maid of honor, despite our strained relationship and the fact that I had already asked my close friend Zoe from college. "It's tradition for the sister to be maid of honor," Eleanor insisted during a video call. "People will think it's strange if I'm not." "I've already asked Zoe," I replied firmly. "She's been my friend for years and has been helping with all the planning." "But I'm your sister," Eleanor countered, her voice taking on the whining quality that had always guaranteed she got her way with our parents. "Mom, tell her I should be maid of honor." "Iris, be reasonable," my mother immediately chimed in. "Eleanor is family. This Zoe girl is just a college friend." For perhaps the first time in my life, I stood my ground completely. Zoe is my maid of honor. Eleanor can be a bridesmaid if she wants to be part of the wedding party. That's my final decision. The wedding day itself was beautiful despite the underlying tension. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, exchanged vows with Marcus, surrounded by friends and family who truly cared about us, and managed to mostly avoid my mother's critical gaze. The one disruption came when Eleanor, true to form, decided to give an unscheduled toast during the reception, sharing embarrassing childhood stories under the guise of sisterly affection. "Iris was always so serious," she told the bemused guests, "always with her nose in a book while I was having actual fun. I guess opposites really do attract. She got the brains, and I got the personality." Uncomfortable laughter followed as Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. "Just breathe," he whispered. "It's almost over." After the wedding, Marcus and I established clear boundaries with my family. I reduced contact to monthly phone calls and visits limited to major holidays. I focused instead on building our life together in Chicago, advancing in my career, and continuing my therapy journey. Meanwhile, Eleanor's post-art school life wasn't unfolding as smoothly as my parents had always anticipated. Her work, while technically proficient, wasn't generating the interest or sales she had expected. She moved back to Seattle after graduation, taking up residence in my old bedroom while working part-time at a local gallery and depending on our parents for financial support. "Eleanor is just finding her artistic voice," my mother explained during one of our monthly calls. "These things take time. Not everyone can have a straightforward career path like finance." The implication, as always, was that my success was somehow less impressive because it was practical rather than creative. I had learned to let these comments slide off me, recognizing them as reflections of my mother's values rather than objective truth. 2 years into my marriage, Eleanor made an unexpected trip to Chicago. She called from the airport, giving me barely an hour's notice of her arrival. "I need to see you," she said, her voice unusually subdued. "It's important. Can you pick me up?" Surprised and a bit suspicious, I agreed to meet her. When she emerged from the terminal, I was struck by how different she looked. Her normally perfect appearance was disheveled, her expression strained. "Thanks for coming," she said as she slid into the passenger seat of my car. "Nice car. Things must be going well for you." The subtle dig was so familiar that I almost smiled. Some things never changed. "What brings you to Chicago, Eleanor?" I asked directly as I navigated the airport traffic. "Can't a sister visit without an interrogation?" she replied defensively. "I wanted to see where you live, catch up in person." I didn't believe her for a second, but I took her to a cafe near my apartment, where we engaged in strained small talk about her latest art projects and my recent promotion at work. It wasn't until we were halfway through our coffee that she finally revealed the true purpose of her visit. "I'm opening my own gallery," she announced, "in Seattle's art district. It's going to showcase emerging artists with my work as the centerpiece." "That's ambitious," I replied carefully. "Congratulations." "The thing is," she continued, stirring her latte without meeting my eyes, "I need some capital to get it off the ground. Mom and Dad have already contributed, but there are renovation costs, insurance, initial inventory." And there it was, the real reason for the sudden sisterly reunion. "How much are you looking for?" I asked, my voice neutral. "50,000, she said, finally looking up. "Just as a loan until the gallery takes off. You and Marcus must have that kind of money with your fancy jobs." The amount was staggering, not because we couldn't afford it, but because of the entitlement behind the request. Eleanor had never shown any interest in my life in Chicago, had never made any effort to maintain a relationship with me, yet she felt comfortable asking for such a substantial sum. "That's a significant amount, Eleanor," I said carefully. "Marcus and I would need to discuss any investment of that size. What's your business plan? Do you have projections for when you'd be able to repay the loan?" Her expression darkened. "I didn't realize I'd need to submit a formal application to my own sister. This isn't a bank transaction, Iris. It's family helping family." "Even family loans should have clear terms," I countered. "It's just good business." "God, you're so cold," she snapped, her facade of friendliness evaporating. "This is exactly why Mom and Dad worry about you. Poor Iris, so smart but so emotionally stunted. No artistic sensibility whatsoever." The casual revelation that my parents discussed me this way behind my back stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "Is that what they say about me?" "Among other things," Eleanor continued, apparently enjoying having found a vulnerable spot. "Dad says your finance career is just glorified bookkeeping. And Mom thinks Marcus could have done better. They're just too nice to say it to your face." Each word was like a knife precisely aimed at old insecurities. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I won't be lending you $50,000, Eleanor," I said quietly. "Not now, not with this approach." Her face contorted with anger. "You've always been jealous of me, always resented the fact that Mom and Dad loved me more. Now you have a chance to actually contribute something valuable to the family, and you're too selfish to do it." "I think this conversation is over," I replied, standing up. "I'll drive you back to the airport or to a hotel, whichever you prefer." "Don't bother," she spat, grabbing her designer handbag, undoubtedly a gift from our parents. "I'll get an Uber. Enjoy your perfect little life here, Iris. Just remember where you came from and who was there for you before you became too good for your family." The irony of her statement, implying that my family had ever been there for me in any meaningful way, would have been laughable if it hadn't been so painful. As I watched her storm out of the cafe, I felt something shift inside me. The last thread connecting me to my toxic family was finally severing, and despite the pain, there was also an unexpected sense of liberation. The aftermath of Eleanor's Chicago visit left me reeling. That night, after recounting the entire confrontation to Marcus, I broke down completely. Years of suppressed hurt and anger erupted in gut-wrenching sobs, as I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of my family's emotional abuse. She said my parents think I'm emotionally stunted. I managed between sobs. That dad calls my career glorified bookkeeping. That mom thinks you could have done better than me. Marcus held me tightly, his own anger evident in his tense shoulders and clenched jaw. They're wrong, Iris. So deeply, fundamentally wrong about who you are and what you've accomplished. The worst part is that I still care what they think, I admitted. After everything, some part of me still wants their approval, their love. That's not weakness, Marcus assured me. It's human. They're your family. You're supposed to be able to count on them. The phone call came the next morning, my parents predictably taking Eleanor's side without even hearing my version of events. Eleanor told us about your conversation, my mother began without preamble. I must say we're very disappointed in your attitude, Iris. My attitude, I repeated incredulously. Eleanor shows up unannounced, asks for $50,000 with no business plan or repayment strategy, insults me when I hesitate, and I'm the one with the attitude problem. She's your sister, my father interjected. Family supports family. Your mother and I have already contributed significantly to her gallery venture. That's your choice, I replied, just as it's my choice not to invest in a business with no clear plan for success. This isn't about business, my mother said sharply. This is about loyalty, about helping your sister achieve her dreams. And what about my dreams? I asked quietly. When have any of you ever supported those? There was a telling silence on the other end of the line. That's different, my father finally said. You've always been self-sufficient. Eleanor is an artist. She needs nurturing. And I didn't. The question escaped before I could stop it, decades of hurt compressed into 3 simple words. Don't be dramatic, Iris, my mother sighed. You've always had everything you needed. Except your support, your attention, your love. Each word felt like ripping off a bandage, exposing wounds that had never properly healed. That's absurd, my father said dismissively. Of course we love you. You're our daughter. You have a funny way of showing it, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. My entire life I've been second best. The afterthought. The daughter who didn't need attention because she wasn't going to fall apart without constant validation. You're being ridiculous, my mother snapped. This is exactly the kind of emotional overreaction that makes it difficult to have a rational conversation with you. It's not an overreaction to expect basic respect and acknowledgement from my parents, I countered, or to decline funding a business venture that has no clear path to success. Well, my father's voice took on the cold, professional tone he typically reserved for difficult clients. If that's how you feel, perhaps we should reconsider our relationship. Eleanor is very upset. She feels betrayed. If you can't support your sister in her time of need, then maybe you should take some time to reconsider your priorities and values. The implied threat was clear: choose Eleanor's side or face exclusion from the family. I think that's actually a good idea, I said, surprising myself with my calm. I do need to reconsider my relationship with this family, all of you. What is that supposed to mean? My mother demanded. It means I'm done, I replied, a strange sense of peace washing over me as I finally articulated what I had been feeling for years. Done trying to earn love that should be freely given. Done being the family scapegoat while Eleanor remains the golden child. Done pretending that this dynamic is normal or healthy. Iris, you're overreacting, my father began, but I cut him off. No, I'm finally reacting appropriately. I'm setting a boundary. I don't want contact with any of you until you can acknowledge the pattern of favoritism and emotional neglect that has defined our family dynamic for as long as I can remember. Are you seriously cutting us off? My mother asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Over one disagreement about helping your sister. This isn't about Eleanor's gallery, I clarified. This is about 27 years of being treated as less than, of having my accomplishments dismissed while Eleanor's every move is celebrated, of being expected to give endlessly while receiving nothing in return. The silence that followed was deafening. If that's how you truly feel, my father finally said, his voice cold, then perhaps distance is best. When you're ready to apologize to your sister and rejoin this family as a constructive member, you know where to find us." The call ended and I sat motionless, phone still in hand, shocked by what had just transpired, yet feeling lighter than I had in years. That evening, I composed a detailed email to my parents and Eleanor formalizing the boundary I had established on the phone. I listed specific instances of favoritism and emotional neglect throughout my childhood and adult years. I explained that I was not cutting them off out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I made it clear that any future relationship would need to be built on mutual respect and acknowledgement of past harm. "I hope someday we can rebuild our relationship on healthier terms," I concluded. "But until then, I need this distance to heal from patterns that have damaged me deeply. Please respect my decision by not contacting me until you're ready to address these issues honestly." I sent the email and then blocked their numbers and email addresses, not permanently, but as a way to enforce the boundary I had established and give myself space to process without their immediate reactions. The first weeks of no contact were a conflicting mixture of grief and relief. I mourned the family I had always wanted, but never had, while simultaneously experiencing the freedom of no longer seeking approval I would never receive. Dr. Levine, my therapist, helped me navigate these complex emotions. "What you're feeling is normal," she assured me during one particularly difficult session. "You're grieving the loss of the relationship you deserve to have with your parents. It's okay to feel sad about that, even as you recognize that the actual relationship was harmful." My parents and Eleanor made predictable attempts to regain control. First came the guilt-tripping messages delivered through mutual connections. Family friends who happened to call with concerns about how my parents were worried sick about me. Then came the unexpected delivery of childhood mementos to my apartment, a transparent attempt at nostalgia-based manipulation. An aunt called to inform me that my mother was heartbroken and my father deeply disappointed by my sudden abandonment of the family. Most disturbing was the casual threat about my potential inheritance delivered via my father's cousin, who thought I should know that my parents were considering revising their will. The implication was clear: return to the fold or face financial consequences. None of these tactics worked. With Marcus's steadfast support and continued therapy, I held firm to my boundary. The manipulation attempts eventually slowed and then stopped altogether as my family realized I was serious about maintaining distance. What surprised me most about this period was the unexpected peace that came with distance. Without the constant drain of trying to earn approval from people incapable of giving it freely, I had more emotional energy for my marriage, my career, and genuine friendships. My professional life flourished. 6 months after cutting contact with my family, I was promoted to senior financial analyst at Hamilton Financial. My confidence grew as I trusted my instincts and abilities without the shadow of familial criticism hanging over me. Marcus and I purchased our first home, a charming 3-bedroom house in a quiet Chicago suburb with good schools and a short commute to the city. As we furnished it and made it our own, I realized I was creating the warm, supportive home environment I had always craved, but never experienced growing up. I also found unexpected healing in helping others with similar experiences. I joined a support group for adult children of emotionally abusive parents, eventually becoming a peer mentor for newcomers. Sharing my story and listening to others helped me contextualize my experiences and recognize that the problem had never been me. It had always been the toxic dynamic my parents had created and maintained. That first Christmas without family contact was both challenging and liberating. Instead of the traditional stressful visit to Seattle, Marcus and I hosted a chosen family celebration with close friends. There were no backhanded compliments, no walking on eggshells, no feeling like an unwelcome guest in my own family gathering. Just warmth, laughter, and genuine connection. "You seem different," our friend Sarah commented as we cleaned up after dinner. "More relaxed somehow. Happier." "I am." I realized the truth of it washing over me. I really am. 5 years passed with no contact from my family. In that time, my life transformed in ways I could never have imagined when I first established that boundary. My career flourished as I was promoted to partner at Hamilton Financial, the youngest in the firm's history. Marcus and I settled into our home, building a life rich with meaningful friendships and professional satisfaction. Through mutual connections and occasional social media glimpses, viewed through friends' accounts, since I had blocked my family members, I gathered bits of information about my parents and Eleanor. None of it surprised me. Eleanor's art gallery had opened with great fanfare, but struggled to attract consistent business. My parents had downsized from their large craftsman to a luxury condo after my father took early retirement from his law firm. Eleanor had moved back in with them supposedly temporarily, while restructuring her business plan. I processed this information with a sense of detachment. Their lives continued on their predictable path, and mine had diverged completely. The emotional hold they once had over me had weakened to almost nothing. The most significant change in my life came with the news that Marcus and I were expecting our first child. The pregnancy, confirmed at 10 weeks, filled us with joy and a new sense of purpose. As we prepared for parenthood, I found myself reflecting on my own childhood, determined to break the cycles of favoritism and emotional manipulation that had damaged me so deeply. "Our child will never question whether they're loved," I told Marcus one evening as we discussed nursery colors. "They'll never feel like they have to earn our approval or compete for our attention." "Never," Marcus agreed, his hand resting protectively on my growing belly. "We're breaking the cycle, Iris. Together." Dr. Levine helped me work through complex feelings about becoming a mother without the support or example of my own mother. "You're not doomed to repeat your parents' patterns," she assured me. "Your awareness alone is a powerful preventative factor, and you've done years of work to understand and heal from your experiences." At 20 weeks pregnant, with our baby girl growing healthy and strong according to every ultrasound, I received an unexpected email from my father. It had been directed to my work email, which I had never blocked, though they had never attempted to use it before. "Iris," it began simply, "I hope this message finds you well. It has been a long time and much has changed. I'm writing because your mother is ill. She has been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer and is undergoing treatment. This health crisis has forced us to confront many difficult truths, including how we've treated you over the years. I know you have every reason to disregard this message, but if you're willing, I would like to speak with you. We need your help, but more importantly, we owe you a long overdue conversation. Please let me know if you would be open to communication. Dad." I stared at the screen, emotions swirling. My first instinct was suspicion. Was this another manipulation tactic? The mention of needing my help particularly triggered alarm bells. Yet something in the tone felt different from previous communications. There was a humility I had never detected in my father's words before. I showed the email to Marcus that evening. "What do you think? Is this genuine or just another attempt to pull me back in because they need something?" Marcus read it carefully. "It could be either," he admitted. "The mention of needing help concerns me, especially given Eleanor's past attempt to get money from you. But the acknowledgement that they owe you a conversation is new. Your father has never admitted any wrongdoing before." "I know," I said softly. "That's what makes me think something has really changed. My mother's illness. If it's true." I couldn't finish the thought. Despite everything, the news that my mother might be seriously ill affected me more deeply than I had expected. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked gently. "I need to verify if this is true before I respond." I decided. I don't want to be pulled back into their drama based on a fabrication. Through a former family friend who now worked at Swedish Medical Center in Seattle, I was able to confirm that my mother had indeed been diagnosed with ovarian cancer and was undergoing an aggressive treatment regimen. The reality of her illness settled heavily on my heart. After careful consideration and discussion with both Marcus and Dr. Levine, I composed a brief, neutral response to my father's email. "I'm sorry to hear about Mom's diagnosis. I hope her treatment is going well. I am willing to have a conversation, but I need to understand exactly what kind of help you're seeking. I also want to be clear that my boundaries regarding our family dynamic remain in place. Iris." His response came within hours, suggesting an urgency I hadn't anticipated. "Thank you for responding, Iris. Your mother's treatment is challenging but showing some promise. As for the help we need, I want to be completely transparent. Our financial situation has become precarious. Between Eleanor's gallery failures, my early retirement, and now your mother's medical bills, we are facing potential bankruptcy. I wouldn't ask if we weren't truly desperate. But more important than any financial consideration is the opportunity to make amends. These past 5 years, and particularly your mother's illness, have forced us to reevaluate many things. I know words mean little after so much hurt, but we are truly sorry for how we've treated you. If you're willing, I would very much like to speak directly. Dad. The mention of financial difficulties didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was the explicit acknowledgement of how we've treated you, and the straightforward apology. In all my years growing up, I had never heard my father apologize for anything. After much deliberation, I decided that I needed to see my family in person to properly assess the situation and their sincerity. At 22 weeks pregnant, I was still able to travel safely, though Marcus insisted on accompanying me, a condition I was grateful for. "I'll book us flights to Seattle for next weekend," I told him. "We'll stay at a hotel, not with them. I need neutral territory and the ability to leave if things become toxic again." "Agreed," Marcus said firmly. "And at the first sign of manipulation or disrespect, we're out of there. Your health and our baby's health come first." I informed my father of our planned visit, setting clear boundaries about the hotel arrangement and the limited nature of our initial meeting. His response was surprisingly accepting, without the guilt-tripping or passive-aggressive comments I would have expected in the past. The week leading up to the trip was filled with anxiety and preparation. Dr. Levine helped me develop strategies for maintaining emotional boundaries during the visit. Marcus arranged for a rental car so we wouldn't be dependent on my parents for transportation. I practiced responses to potential manipulative scenarios, determined not to be drawn back into unhealthy patterns. As our plane descended into Seattle, I placed a protective hand over my growing belly, making a silent promise to my daughter that no matter what happened with my family of origin, she would always be secure in my love and protection. Whatever closure or new beginning might come from this visit, my primary focus remained the family Marcus and I were creating. A family built on mutual respect, open communication, and unconditional love. The Seattle skyline emerged through patches of clouds as our plane descended, familiar and foreign all at once. 5 years had changed the city in subtle ways, new buildings dotting the landscape, the Space Needle newly renovated. Yet the essence remained the same. My hometown, but no longer my home. "You okay?" Marcus asked, his hand warm and steady over mine. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath. We had arranged to meet my parents the following day, giving ourselves time to settle into our hotel and prepare mentally for the encounter. That evening, as we dined at a waterfront restaurant I had once loved, I felt a strange disconnection, like I was visiting a place I had only read about rather than lived in for over 20 years of my life. "What are you hoping for from tomorrow?" Marcus asked as we watched ferries cross the darkening waters of Puget Sound. I considered the question carefully. Honesty, I suppose. Acknowledgement of the past. I'm not expecting a miracle transformation, but I need to know if there's any real change, or if this is just another manipulation because they need something from me. "And if it is manipulation," he pressed gently, "then we leave, return to Chicago, and continue our lives as before," I said with more certainty than I felt. The baby kicked as if affirming my resolve, and I smiled despite my anxiety. The address my father had provided was for a condominium in a modest building in Ballard, a significant step down from their former craftsman home in one of Seattle's most expensive neighborhoods. As Marcus parked our rental car, I took a moment to center myself, reviewing the boundaries I had established with Dr. Levine. "Remember," Marcus said as we approached the building, "we can leave at any time. No explanations needed." My father opened the door before we could knock, as if he had been watching for our arrival. The man who stood before me was a shock, thinner, grayer, with deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth that hadn't been there 5 years ago. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Iris," he finally said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Thank you for coming." His eyes dropped to my visible pregnancy, widening slightly. "You're expecting, "Yes," I replied simply. 22 weeks. He seemed momentarily at a loss for words, then collected himself. "Please come in. Both of you." The condo was small but tastefully furnished, though with noticeably fewer of the luxury items that had filled their previous home. My mother sat in an armchair by the window, a colorful scarf wrapped around her head, where her once immaculate blonde hair had been. The physical changes wrought by cancer treatment were immediately apparent. The weight loss, the pallor of her skin, the fragility in her posture. "Iris," she said softly, making no move to rise. Whether from physical weakness or emotional uncertainty, I couldn't tell. "You're pregnant." "Yes," I confirmed again, remaining near the entryway with Marcus close behind me. "A girl, due in July." "Congratulations," my father said, genuine warmth in his voice that surprised me. "To both of you. Please sit down. Can I get you anything, water, tea?" The politeness felt surreal after years of conflict followed by silence. "Water would be fine," I replied, moving cautiously to sit on the sofa across from my mother. Marcus sat beside me, his presence a steady anchor. As my father busied himself in the kitchen, an awkward silence filled the room. I noticed my mother's hands trembling slightly in her lap. "How are you feeling?" I finally asked, unsure what else to say. "I have good days and bad," she replied, her voice lacking its usual crisp authority. "Today is somewhere in between. The chemo is difficult, but the doctors are cautiously optimistic." My father returned with glasses of water, setting them carefully on coasters on the coffee table. "We appreciate you coming," he said, taking a seat beside my mother. "I know it couldn't have been an easy decision." "Where's Eleanor?" I asked, noticing her absence. My parents exchanged a glance that contained volumes of unspoken communication. "She's at a therapy appointment," my father answered, surprising me. "She'll join us later if that's all right with you." "Therapy?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "Yes," my mother said, a hint of her old defensiveness surfacing briefly before she visibly tamped it down. "We're all seeing therapists now, individual and family sessions. It's been enlightening." The admission that my image-conscious parents were not only seeing therapists, but openly acknowledging it, was perhaps the first genuine sign that something had indeed changed. "Your email mentioned financial difficulties," I said, deciding to address the elephant in the room directly. "I'd like to understand exactly what's happening before we discuss anything else." My father nodded, straightening his shoulders as if preparing to deliver a difficult legal brief. "The short version is that we've made a series of poor financial decisions that have left us in a precarious position. The longer version is more complicated." What followed was a surprisingly candid account of their financial downfall. They had remortgaged their home to fund Eleanor's gallery, which had failed to generate sustainable revenue despite initial interest. My father had retired earlier than planned due to increasing stress reducing their income. Eleanor had apparently taken out additional loans using their names as guarantors. Some my father admitted with evident shame without their full knowledge of the terms. "We discovered she had forged our signatures on some of the documents," he said, the admission clearly painful. "We didn't press charges. She's our daughter, but the financial damage was done." "And then I got sick," my mother added quietly. "Our insurance is good, but not comprehensive. The out-of-pocket costs have been significant. We've sold the house, most of our investments, even Victoria's jewelry collection," my father continued. "But the medical bills keep coming, and there are still outstanding loans connected to the gallery." I listened with a mixture of sympathy and wariness. Their situation sounded genuinely dire, but years of manipulation had taught me to be cautious. "I appreciate your honesty," I said carefully, "but I'm still not clear on what exactly you're asking from me." My father looked me directly in the eyes, something he had rarely done in our previous interactions. "Primarily, we're asking for help with your mother's medical expenses. Our insurance has a cap, and we're approaching it rapidly. Beyond that, we're asking for a chance to make amends, to acknowledge the harm we've caused, and try to rebuild some kind of relationship if you're willing." "We've been wrong, Iris," my mother said, her voice breaking slightly. "So terribly wrong in how we treated you. It took losing you completely to finally see it." The words I had waited decades to hear now hung in the air between us. I felt Marcus's hand on my back, a silent reminder of his support. "Why now?" I asked, needing to understand if this change was genuine or merely a product of their desperation. "Is it just because you need financial help, or has something else changed?" "It started before the financial crisis," my father admitted. "When you cut contact 5 years ago, it forced us to examine ourselves in ways we had avoided. Your absence created a mirror we couldn't ignore. We tried to maintain our narrative at first," my mother added, "that you were being dramatic, oversensitive. But as months passed with no contact, we began to question that story. Richard's cousin Caroline, you remember her, she's a family therapist, suggested we might consider our role in the estrangement." "It was a slow process," my father continued. "We resisted at first. But eventually we began therapy, individually and as a couple. The financial issues and Eleanor's difficulties accelerated that process. And then Victoria's diagnosis brought everything into sharper focus." "Cancer has a way of clarifying what matters," my mother said softly, "and what doesn't. Pride appearances control. They mean nothing when you're wondering if you'll live to see another year." Their words seemed sincere, their vulnerability unprecedented in my experience of them. Still, decades of conditioning made me hesitant to fully trust this apparent transformation. "And Eleanor?" I asked. "Where does she stand in all this?" As if on cue, the front door opened and my sister entered. Like our parents, she had changed visibly in 5 years. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup that had been her uniform. She looked simpler, more subdued, her artistic flair expressed in more subtle ways. She stopped short when she saw me, her eyes widening at my pregnant belly. "Iris," she said, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "You came." "Hello, Eleanor," I replied neutrally. She hovered awkwardly near the door. Would you prefer if I left?" The deference was so unlike the entitled sister I remembered that it momentarily threw me. "No, you can stay. We were just discussing the family situation." Eleanor moved to sit in an armchair adjacent to our parents, maintaining a noticeable distance that spoke volumes about the current family dynamic. "I owe you an apology," she said abruptly, the words seeming to burst from her. "Several apologies, actually. For Chicago. For everything before that, too." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I was horrible to you," she admitted, twisting her hands in her lap. "Entitled, selfish, competitive in the worst way. I took advantage of Mom and Dad's favoritism instead of recognizing how wrong it was. And then I had the audacity to ask you for money after years of treating you like you didn't matter." Her self-awareness was startling. The Eleanor I had known had never demonstrated such insight or acknowledged any wrongdoing. "What changed?" I asked directly. Eleanor glanced at our parents before answering. "Everything fell apart," she said simply. "The gallery failed. My artistic career stalled. I ran out of money and options. And for the first time in my life, I had to face the reality that I wasn't special or entitled to success just because our parents had always told me I was." She took a deep breath before continuing. "My therapist helped me see that I was raised to believe I was exceptional without being given the tools to actually earn that exceptionalism. I was praised for existing while you were ignored despite actually achieving things. It created a monster, honestly." The brutal honesty of her self-assessment left me momentarily speechless. "We failed, both of you," my father interjected quietly. "In different ways, but equally damaging. We put Eleanor on a pedestal she couldn't possibly maintain, and we ignored your very real accomplishments and needs. Neither approach prepared you adequately for adulthood." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, with surprising moments of clarity and accountability from all three of them. They shared insights from their therapy journeys, acknowledged specific instances of favoritism and neglect, and expressed what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I know words aren't enough," my mother said as our conversation began to wind down. "And I understand if you can't forgive us. But I need you to know that I am deeply, profoundly sorry for how I failed you as a mother. You deserved so much better." The apology I had waited a lifetime to hear washed over me with unexpected emotional force. I felt tears threatening and took a moment to compose myself. "Thank you for saying that," I finally managed. "It means a lot to hear it." As Marcus and I prepared to leave, promising to consider their request for help with medical expenses, I felt oddly unsettled. The meeting had gone better than I could have possibly imagined, with levels of accountability and self-awareness I had never witnessed from my family before. Yet part of me remained wary, conditioned by years of disappointment, to expect that this apparent transformation would prove fleeting or conditional. In the car, Marcus voiced what I had been thinking. "They seem genuinely changed," he observed. "But it's also convenient that this transformation coincides with their need for financial help." "Exactly," I agreed. "I want to believe them, but I need to be careful. This could be the most elaborate manipulation yet." "What do you want to do?" he asked as we drove back to our hotel. I rested my hand on my belly, feeling our daughter's movements as I considered the path forward. "I think I need to help with Mom's medical bills," I said slowly. "I can't walk away from that regardless of our past, but I want to do it with conditions, strict boundaries about our relationship moving forward." That night in our hotel room, I drafted a proposal with Marcus's input. We would assist with my mother's medical expenses, directly paying the providers rather than giving money to my parents. In exchange, I required their commitment to continued family therapy, including sessions with me when I felt ready. I established clear boundaries about their involvement in my life and my child's future. No uninvited visits, no unsolicited parenting advice, no reverting to old patterns of favoritism or criticism. The following morning, we returned to present these terms. To my surprise, my family accepted them without argument or guilt-tripping. "These are more than fair," my father said, reviewing the document I had prepared, "and to be honest, more generous than we deserve." "We want to do better, Iris," my mother added, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Whatever it takes." Eleanor, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. "I know I have the most to prove to you," she said. "I've been the worst offender in many ways, but I'm committed to changing, to earning back some measure of trust if that's ever possible." As we left Seattle the next day, I felt cautiously optimistic about the possibility of a new type of relationship with my family. Not the unconditionally close bond that would never be possible after so much damage, but perhaps something healthier and more balanced than what had come before. "It's strange," I told Marcus as our plane took off Seattle, shrinking beneath us. "Part of me never thought this day would come, that they would actually acknowledge the harm they caused." "People can change," he replied, squeezing my hand, "especially when life forces them to confront their mistakes. The question is whether the change will stick when the crisis passes." "That's what we'll have to wait and see," I agreed. "But for the first time, I feel like there's at least a possibility." 1 year later, I sat in my Chicago backyard watching my parents cautiously interact with their 6-month-old granddaughter Lily. My mother, now in remission from her cancer, was showing Lily a butterfly that had landed on a nearby flower. My father was taking photos, his expression soft with wonder. "She has your eyes," my mother commented, glancing up at me with a tentative smile. "And Marcus's chin," I replied, returning the smile. The year since our reunion had been a journey of cautious rebuilding. True to their word, my parents had continued therapy both individually and as a family. When Lily was born, they had asked permission before visiting, stayed at a hotel rather than our home, and respected every boundary I had established regarding their role as grandparents. Eleanor had perhaps shown the most dramatic transformation. After completing an intensive therapy program, she had abandoned her art gallery dreams and returned to school, pursuing a degree in art therapy with the goal of working with children. She had gotten her own apartment, taken a part-time job to support herself, and systematically repaid as much of her debt as possible. "She's so alert," Eleanor remarked, now sitting cross-legged on the lawn near my mother and Lily, "already observing everything." She's curious, I agreed, always watching, taking it all in. Like her mother, my father said with a warmth that still surprised me sometimes. Our relationship remained a work in progress. There were awkward moments, old patterns that occasionally resurfaced and needed to be addressed. There were times when I still felt the instinctive wariness born from years of emotional neglect. But there was also genuine effort on all sides to create something healthier than what had come before. The financial situation had stabilized. My mother's medical treatments had been successful and the insurance issues resolved. My parents had adjusted to a more modest lifestyle, free from the status consciousness that had once defined their choices. My father had taken a part-time consulting position with his old firm, providing some income while allowing him to care for my mother during her recovery. As I watched my family interact with my daughter, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. 5 years of no contact had been necessary, a clean break that forced everyone to confront patterns too long ignored. The subsequent crisis had accelerated a process of reflection and change that might otherwise have never occurred. Walking away had been the hardest and best decision I had ever made. Not because it led to a fairy tale reconciliation, our relationship would always bear the scars of the past, but because it allowed me to find my own worth independent of their validation. That strength had made it possible to consider reconnection on my terms from a position of self-respect, rather than desperate longing for approval. Later that evening, after my parents and Eleanor had returned to their hotel, Marcus and I put Lily to bed together, marveling as always at her perfect tiny features and peaceful sleep. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked as we stood watching over her crib. "About cycles," I replied softly. "About how hard we work to break them." He wrapped his arm around my shoulders, understanding without further explanation. We had talked often about our determination to create a different kind of family for Lily, one where she would never question her worth or feel she had to earn our love. "We're doing it," he assured me, "one day at a time." As I looked down at my sleeping daughter, I felt a profound sense of purpose. The journey from family scapegoat to empowered adult had been painful and complex, but it had led me here, to a life rich with genuine connection to the family I had created with love and intention, to a relationship with my parents and sister that, while imperfect, was finally based on truth rather than illusion. Sometimes walking away is necessary before any reconciliation becomes possible. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and ultimately for others, is to refuse to participate in dysfunctional patterns even when that refusal causes pain and disruption. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, that disruption creates space for genuine transformation. "You know," I said to Marcus as we quietly left the nursery, "5 years ago I never could have imagined this outcome, that they would actually change, that we could build something new from the ashes of what came before." "Life is full of surprises," he replied, pulling me close. "Some of them even turn out to be good ones." I smiled, leaning into his embrace. The golden child and the scapegoat, those roles had defined my family for so long. But they were labels from the past, not definitions of our future. We were writing a new story now, one day at a time, with honesty, boundaries, and the hard-earned wisdom that comes from confronting painful truths. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family relationships to protect yourself? Or have you experienced reconciliation after establishing firm boundaries? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength after family trauma. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their well-being over toxic relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, and the strongest thing you can do is leave the door open for genuine change.